Hi friends, I hope you are fine. I would like to welcome you all for today's lesson. We are looking at the lower respiratory system. So last time we've been looking at the upper respiratory system, and I hope you understood the topic to the fullest. So today we are going to continue on the lower respiratory system. So pay attention as we are going to look at this system. So the structures that we're going to consider for today under the respiratory system, the first one will be the trachea, as we are already seen on this diagram. We're going to talk about the trachea and its structures that it composed of, like the cartilage rings that are shown on that diagram. We're also going to talk about the primary bronchus, and both of them which are bronchi. We're also going to talk about the branches from the bronchi, that's now the bronchioles that gets into the lungs. And lastly, we are going to talk about the alveoli, which are the air sacs that are found within the lungs, and primary functions of the lungs, which are enables the process of respiratory, which is the gaseous in this case. So now, having said all those structures that we're going to consider much today, let's now start with the trachea. Let's see what is it that the trachea is. So in this case, we're saying that another name of the trachea is also said to be the windpipe, because it actually aids in the transportation of the air from the lungs into outside the body and also from outside the body, the atmosphere, into the lungs in this case. So we're saying that this windpipe actually it extends from an inferior edge of the larynx to the upper part of the chest superior to the heart. So what we're saying in this case, last time we ended on the larynx, said that was the part of the upper respiratory system. So from the larynx, we are going to have the trachea now, which is going to stand as the first structure of the lower respiratory system. And the function of this trachea, actually in this case, it conducts air between the larynx and also the lungs, because it is found in between. And this trachea, actually it is composed of some cartilages that actually enables or ensures its integrity, to maintain its integrity, so that it cannot remain blocked even when the body is not in a upright position. Even if you bend your neck, you find that still you can able to breathe, because of the cartilages that actually surrounds the trachea, so that it maintains the airway pattern. So you're saying that this cartilage, each cartilage is shaped in a horseshoe-like or a C-shaped cartilage. And the very cartilage, when you look at its posterior part, it is not covered or it's not joined like it is the anterior part. The only function it is to allow the esophagus to extend, or rather to dilate, as it is as the person is swallowing food substances. For us to understand this more better, we are going to see the diagram that is demonstrating what we are talking about in this case. So to continue, this is the diagram that we are talking about, or the trachea. So we are saying that actually the trachea, it extends from the larynx. So we can see those upper cartilages that are shown, the thyroid cartilage, the cricothyroid cartilage, and cricoid cartilage. Actually, these were the structures of the larynx that we discussed last time. So in this case, from that part inferiorly, we have now the trachea, which is showing the rings. But if you are to enlarge these rings, they are going to appear like this. So this is what we are saying. So when you look at the anterior part of these rings, which is the near part to where we are, it is showing that they are actually the cartilages that are C-shaped. But look at its posterior part, where it is just adjacent to the esophagus. It is actually shown that these cartilages are not there. Why is it like that? So as to ensure the maximum opening of the esophagus as they are swallowing something or food substances. So that's the structure of the trachea in this case. Its function, we said that actually with the structure, it denotes its functions of allowing the esophagus actually to open as swallowing is taking place. Then theoretically, we are saying that the structure of this trachea, first of all, it is composed of those cartilages, the C-shaped cartilages that are about 16 to 20 in number, and they are incomplete at their posterior part, and we have already mentioned the reason why they are like that, so as to ensure the maximum opening of the esophagus. And the layers of this trachea, we've got the outer layer, which consists of the fibrous and elastic tissues that actually allows the trachea to increase in size and also to reduce, or to promote the contractility of the trachea as the breathing mechanism is taking place, and also during the swallowing something, it is going to make the trachea to constrict so as to ensure the enlargement of the esophagus. And it also have the middle layer, which consists of the smooth muscles that actually helps in the breathing mechanisms, for they are under involuntary mechanism. And we also have the inner lining, which consists the epithelium, or rather the mucosa membrane, which actually its functions to secrete mucus that is essential in the air that is we are breathing. First thing, it humidifies the air, and also due to the fact that this mucosa membrane are highly vesicular, it also warms the air as you are breathing in, so as to maintain homeostasis within the body. And this is what is shown on this diagram. So on this diagram, we've just used the different terms denoting those layers that we have talked about. So the outer layer that we talked about, in this case, we are saying the adventitia, which contains actually the fibrous tissue and also the elastic tissue, which actually enables or enhance the relaxation and also contractility of the trachea. We also have the hyaline cartilage at the middle, where we also said that it is composed of the smooth muscles, and inside, of course, the inner layer, which is said to be the submucosa, the very mucosa membrane which actually secretes the mucus in this case. So this is the structure of the trachea, and in this case we are talking about the functions of the trachea. Apart from those that we have already mentioned of allowing the esophagus to extend, we've got other functions that this structure actually plays as the part of the respiratory system. The first one, it is support and patents. Actually, in this case, we are much concerned with how it is made up of. It has those cartilages that we have seen with our C-shaped that actually prevents the trachea from becoming obstructed when the body is not in upright position. For example, if I tell you bend your neck to keep the airway system to be patent and open, the trachea contains these C-shaped bones. So we're saying that the structure of it actually prevents the kinking or the obstruction of the airway. And also the second function is that having that those cartilages are not complete at their posterior part, they allow the esophagus to distend during swallowing. And the trachea also contains the mucociliary escalator. In this case, what you're talking about is the mucous membrane that it has, and also the ciliary cells that are lined within this trachea. What's the function of that? Actually, they trap the microorganisms that can be held together with the air as you are breathing in, and also bacteria that can be contained within that air, or dusty particles. So to ensure that the air that is reaching the lungs contains no these pathogens, the trachea contains these mucociliary escalators. Another function of the trachea, it is in the cough reflex. As you inhale any foreign bodies, when they reach the respiratory system, specifically in the trachea, it is going to detect that due to the cells that it has. And when this happens, the impulse are going to be sent to the brain of having detected a foreign body. Hence, there will be the cough reflex that is going to be induced from the brain, and the person will be able to cough, so that those foreign bodies can easily be expectorated or swallowed as you are expectorating them from the respiratory system. So that's one of the function of the trachea. And another function, just like we have already mentioned, it has the mucous membrane. It actually warms the air due to the highly being vesicular or being supplied with the blood vessels, hence warming the air. It also humidifies the air that you breathe because of the presence of the mucus that is secreted from the mucous membrane. And also the trachea has the function of filtering of air. How does it do so? We talked about the ciliary cells that are found within the trachea that have got the capability of trapping those dust particles, the microorganisms, and filtering the air so that it can reach the lungs at the good condition and so as to maintain the homeostasis within the lungs. So these are some of the functions of the trachea as being one of the part of lower respiratory system. We can now talk about the bronchi. From the trachea, as we have already seen on that first diagram that we had just shown, it is proved that from the trachea we've got the first two primary branches, which are the bronchi. We've got the right bronchus and the left bronchus. So we're saying that at its inferior end, the trachea divides into two primary or main stem bronchi, which enters each lung. So we've got two bronchi which enters each lung, and as they are entering into the lungs, they are going to bifurcate into another small air passages that we are going to see as we are going on, that we call the bronchioles, so as it to supply the lungs with the oxygenated air that is inhaled from the atmosphere, and also to drain the carbon dioxide that is from the blood into these air passages so as to ensure the maximum gaseous exchange. So we're saying that the right bronchi is actually considerably larger in diameter than it is with the left one, and it is more vertical than the left bronchi. And in this case, it is believed that due to the fact of its anatomy, it is more likely to be manifested with the foreign bodies because of its dilatation, because it's bigger in size. So when you're inhaling some dusty particles, it is more likely for the right lung to be obstructed by these foreign bodies because its passage it is actually wider. So we're saying that each bronchus enters the lung at a notch or a depression that we call the hilum. So when we say the hilum, in this case, is just a part of the lung, actually the interior part of the lung, where these bronchi takes their passage into the lung, and also the blood vessels, they get their entry into the lung through this hilum, that was the hilum that we are talking about in this case, and we are going to see it as we are going to show the diagram containing this hilum part that I'm talking about. So this is the diagram that is actually showing what we are talking about in this case, looking at the bronchi. So we are saying that from the trachea, above there we can see the trachea in between the lungs, and we can see the two branches that are branching off from the trachea, labeled bronchi. So these are the bronchi that we are talking about, that branches from the trachea. So the right bronchi, just like we have already mentioned, it is wider and shorter for about 2 centimeters, and it is more likely to be obstructed by the inhaled foreign bodies due to the fact that it is wider. And we are saying that after entering the right lung at the hilum, it divides into 3 branches, 1 to each lobe, and we've already mentioned this. So the way it is, when the bronchi divides, when it is the right bronchi, it is going to divide into 3 lobes, or rather 3 branches that enters each lobe of the lung. These lobes of the lungs are the parts of the lungs. The right lung, it has 3 lobes. The left lung, it has 2 lobes due to the fact that the other part where this lung was supposed to occupy in the thoracic cavity is occupied by the heart. So we're saying that the right lung, it is bigger than the left lung. Hence, it contains 3 lobes. Then the left lung, the left bronchus, it is about 5 centimeters long, and it is narrower than it is with the right bronchus, and I've already mentioned this. And we're saying that as it is entering the lung, it divides into 2 lobes, which is the superior and the inferior lobe. But with the right one, we've got the superior, middle, and the inferior lobe. So the lining or the air passages, this is just the structures that we want to see that actually lines up these or air passages that we have been talking about from the time we started looking at the lower respiratory system. So we're saying that the trachea, the bronchi, and other conducting passages of our respiratory tract are lined with a special type of epithelium, which is the simple columnar epithelium. But you find that as the airway system gets to descend down to the level of the alveoli that we are yet to talk about, you find that actually this simple columnar epithelium, it gets to appear as being stratified, hence given a name pseudostratified, meaning the falsely stratified layer. Why is it like that? It is actually to ensure its patent and to actually maximize the capability of gaseous exchange to take place. So we're saying that these cells actually, they have the cilia, which are essential for filtering the air or the impurities that may be contained within the air. And these impurities, as they are being filtered, they are going to be excreted or expectorated through coughing, through sneezing, or through blowing the nose, because we talked about the cough reflux that is going to be induced by the trachea due to the presence of the microorganisms, or rather the dust particles or any foreign bodies that has to be expectorated outside the airway system. We are done with the bronchi. Now we are to talk about the bronchioles and the alveoli, which are the branches of the bronchi. So we're saying that the bronchioles are air passage inside the lungs, which branch from the bronchi. And these bronchioles, they do deliver their air or the air that is contained within them into the alveoli, which is the functional unity of the lung, which is essential for the gaseous exchange, where oxygen and carbon dioxide, they get to be exchanged. Carbon dioxide from the blood and oxygen from the alveoli, and there's a gaseous exchange that takes place between these two structures. So we're saying that during inhalation, oxygen is put into the bronchioles, and carbon dioxide, it is collected from the alveoli through the bronchioles into outside the airway system through the very bronchioles that we're talking about. Then when it comes to the alveoli, this alveoli is just the distal part of the lower respiratory system, which is surrounded by the network of the capillaries. What do these capillaries contains is actually the blood. The capillary is just one of the blood vessels. Hence, gaseous exchange, it takes place when there's an exchange of air between the alveoli and the blood that is contained within the blood capillaries. And we're saying that in between the squamous cells or the alveoli, there are surfactants that are being secreted in form of the phospholipid fluid, which prevents the collapse of the lungs or drying out of the alveoli as the air is being exhaled or expired, and also prevents the collapsing of the alveoli. So the secretion of the surfactants into the distal air passage and air alveoli, it begins about the 35th week of the fetal life. What we are concerned with in this case, we all know that during the fetal age, respiration, it doesn't go, or rather circulation does not go like it is in adult, where there is double circulation, the pulmonary and systemic circulation, but rather there is a fetal circulation where it doesn't follow that pulmonary and systemic circulation. So in this case, we are saying that for these secretions to start being formed, it is actually at the age of the 35th week of fetal life, where the baby is preparing to be able to breathe for him or herself. Or what we are saying in this case, the alveoli, it is the structure within the lungs where gaseous exchange actually takes place from. What is the function of these two structures that we've said? Remember, when we're looking at, we introduced the topic of respiration, we talked about the three phases of respiration. There was pulmonary respiration, there was external respiration, and internal respiration. So now in this case, we are saying that one of the functions of the alveoli, it is external respiration, where the gases moves from the alveoli into the blood, and also carbon dioxide moves from the blood into the alveoli for it to be excreted out. Another function, it is defense against microbes. These alveoli, they do not have those layers that we have talked about, or that lines up the upper respiratory system, like the production of the mucus, the cilia, or the ciliated cells that are essential to trap microorganisms. But rather, they've got the plasma cells that are essential in the production of the antibodies that can react in the presence of the antigens. They also have the macrophages and polymorphonuclear lymphocytes, which are essential to play the role in the phagocytosis, where when they detect any foreign body, they are going to react to it to engulf and digest that foreign body so as to avoid infection. So that's one of the function of the alveoli, being the defense and the defense against the microbes. Another function is warming and humidification. Due to the fact that it is highly fascicular, it is able to give that heat that is produced from the blood to the air that is inhaled, so as to maintain homeostasis. Also, humidification of air if at all dry. This is just a continuous mechanism from the upper respiratory system. Now we're done with that part, the structures of the lower respiratory system. We can briefly talk about the lungs as being the major organ of the respiratory system, and those are tiny structures that we have been talking about, they actually being found within the lungs. So in terms of its position, we're saying that actually the lungs, they lie on both sides of the thoracic cavity, one on each part of the midline. And this lung, in terms of its shape, it is described to be over the cone shaped, where it has the apex and the base. It also has the costal surface and the medial surface. So when we talk about this apex, this is the superior part of the lung, which actually extends from the root of the neck, and it is about 25 millimeters above the level of the clavicle bone, so to speak. And we are going to see the diagram that is actually demonstrating what we are talking about in this case. And the structures that are associated to this part, which is the superior part or the apex part of the lung, there is actually the blood vessels that comes from the heart. There are also the nerves and the root of the neck. This just denotes the location where the apex of the lung is actually located. And we also have the base. The base, this is just the inferior part or the bottom part of the lung, which is said to be concave and semilunar in shape, and is closely associated with the thoracic surface of the diaphragm. So if you take a close look at the lung, it is seen to be resting on the diaphragm. So the related structure of the base of the lung, it is actually the diaphragm, which is the dome-shaped muscle that enhances breathing mechanism. And we also have the costal surface. The costal surface is just the surface, the outer surface of the lung, that actually it is in relationship with the costal muscles and the surface of the thoracic cavity. That it is described as being convex and is closely associated with the costal cartilages, the ribs, and the intercostal muscles. So this is just the outer part or outer surface of the lung. And we also have the medial surface of the lung. This is actually the interior part, or rather anterior part of the lung, so to speak, which is actually said to be triangular in shape. And this is where you are going to find the ileum, where the bronchi and the blood vessels, they get their entry into the lung. And in terms of the location, it's said to be at the level of 5th, 6th, and 7th thoracic vertebrae. So here we can see the diagram of the lung that is showing us what is it that the lung is all about. We can see we have the trachea that is getting us into the lower respiratory system, and where the bronchi are going to bifurcate enters the lungs. So these are the lungs that we have been talking about. So we can see the apex of the lung. To the right hand side, we can see it is actually adjacent to the first clavicle bone, so to speak. Near the clavicle bone, which is the first limb, we can see it is actually 25 millimeters above that. And we can see all those related structures that we have talked about. This is the diagram that is demonstrating the structures of the lungs. Now, what is the organization of the lungs? In this case, we're just talking about the structure itself internally. What is the lung like? So we're saying that the right lung, it is divided into three distinct lobes, just like we have already mentioned when we were talking about the bronchioles. So it is in the three segments, where we've got the superior part, the middle part, and the inferior part. But when you talk about the left lung, having that it is smaller than that of the right lung, it is only divided into two lobes, which is the superior and the inferior lobe. And the functional unit of these lungs, which are the air sacs, are called the alveoli. We talked about the alveoli when we were looking at the structures of the lower respiratory system. So the alveoli is the structure or the functional unity of the lung as the primary organ of the respiratory system. So we're saying that the flat alveoli, type 1 cells that form most of the alveolar walls are simple squamous epithelium. And in the spaces between the clusters of the alveoli, there is elastic connective tissues, which is important for the exhalation. And in between those structures or the cells, that's where we are going to find the production of the surfactants, which actually reduces the surface area of the fluidity and also maintains the alveoli open even after expiration, and to avoid drying up of the alveoli. And we're saying that within the alveoli, there are macrophages that actually plays the function in the phagocytic mechanism of foreign bodies, so as to ensure the absence of the infection within the lungs. And this is actually what we are talking about in terms of the segments that the lungs contains. So we can see the right lung, it contains three lobes, which is the superior, middle, and the inferior lobe. And we can see on the left lung, it contains only two lobes, which is the superior and the inferior lobe. And we can see that the left lung is actually smaller than it is with the right one. And we can see the structure or that cave where the apex of the heart rests on the left lung, hence reducing its size. Friends, thank you very much for your time. I guess this is how far we can go for today. We have been looking at the structures of the lower respiratory system, and we have also introduced the lung, and we talked about the number of things that can either be beneficial to yourself knowing on the lung. Thank you very much for your time. Bye.